You won't be at either meeting.
Nope.
Where's that guy? Hmm?
Colin,
You don't like us. You don't like us.
I know, something, huh?
Yep.
His email, he's having trouble with his email. He's reached his quota on his personal email. And so now he's not getting any email. So I've been talking to him on about his email.
Really?
Yeah. Let me send this login and we're on our way.
This is pay pass. And we usually fix it with our trail cat.
Oh dang.
But it's
Just all washed out this year,
got
huh?
a lot of
Is that
washed
going
in.
down the Mogi or?
No, it's out further. It's more out towards Height.
Okay.
There's Paiute Pass, Chocolate Drop, and 2 or 3
So on that other side.
kind
Huh?
of ATV type roads. But they're on our list, and we usually go out and do them with our trail cat. But
Where that's been all bridged, washed out, and everything. We haven't even been able to get out there. We had that trailer stuck out there and our cat on his side. So
but it's open now, right?
yeah.
Todd and Todd Hurst both said as soon as they get the old trail cat that we recovered from
Yeah.
Colorado,
Yeah.
as soon as they get it repaired, they'll have somebody go out and fix that.
Okay.
So,
You guys ready? You guys figured it out?
Yep.
You have
Yeah.
the budget?
yeah.
It's
Okay.
So it's just under the agenda. I think you'll have the control of the mouse. He's got the Unicode on there.
So you guys have the budget, right?
So that's the that's Polaris. So probably don't want to pull that one up. It would be the other one. And you got the PDF on. The PDF should be on there.
Okay. Do you want to make the adjustments on this one here as we go through?
Yeah, you're welcome to.
You guys would have to type it.
I don't have the
Keyboard?
He's got Unicode on.
Yeah, I've got Unicode here.
So how are you going to make the adjustments? Just write them down on your thing?
However you want to.
Yeah, because that was it. This whole meeting here today is just to go over the budget and make the adjustments to equal 0. 0 expenses, 0 revenue. So balance your budget. And so we might have to make the
Megan just said you're
adjustments on there. What's that?
That you're muted.
Yeah, we haven't started. Are you guys ready? We can start.
It's recording.
It's recording. Okay, perfect. Okay, we're ready then. We are ready.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open the meeting for budget consideration. Whoever has the knowledge, give us the detail. Are we gonna finalize the budget today?
Not today. This is just really just kind of working through. As you see on here, we've got our proposed, the 2020 manual proposed budget. You've got revenues coming in at 17 $1,077,073. We've got expenses that exceed our revenue of $18,303,812. So we are over budgeted by $1,226,739. That is what we got to fix. And so that's the critical part right there. So as we look at it here, one of the questions that we have is, are we collecting all of the possible and potential revenue as we can on here, and then going through our expenses, where do you cut to get that lower?
According to the auditor, who is it? Assessor? We're not collecting all of it.
Correct. So you can see on here, in 2019, our property tax came in at $2,170,000. We dropped down in 2020 from $2,123,000. And 2021 we kept it, and I don't know, do you guys have the final tax total on there? So you haven't received those yet?
No, we haven't.
Okay. So we kept that at $2,150,000, and for next year's budget. So you can kind of see a trend where it's going down on here. Quite a significant dip between 2019 and 2020. This trending wise, I doubt our tax has gone up. So more than likely we're down that year, and we will have to be down this year as well.
With values going up so much higher, I can't imagine that our revenues would go down, Nick.
So what's happening, and that was just the shift, because the essentially assessed dipped, then we had to push more into our property values for the personal property value side of it. And so those went up, but that was just a balance with the tax rate that we have. And so that just, what it does is it just shifts the burden over to those that are paying the tax. No matter what, we get that same amount in tax. And so it was literally just that shift. But your centrally assessed continues to decrease.
So are we eventually not going to collect any centrally assessed?
It will continue to go down until you get your mining operations back, and or you get those types of businesses, manufacturings that can bring in more of your centrally assessed property. So yeah, that's across the board from the tax commission. That was one of the messages when they came down. They specifically pointed out that our centrally assessed isn't doing well, and that's you've heard it from me before. Is a lot of our policies and the decisions that we make in here, they do affect that. So if we're anti-mining, anti-extraction, well, that's your centrally assessed. And so your centrally assessed goes down, and that affects CIB, all of that. It's all pulled out of that. The price of oil, you're starting to see and hear rumblings, of more extraction taking place under Biden just because of the oil prices. But I don't know where it goes. But
that's all on private land.
Yeah, yep,
It's not on public.
not on public, and we're
So that
90% public, and so
that really doesn't help where the extraction is on private land. It doesn't help counties that have a lot of public land.
Yeah, so when you look at the trend line for that, it does not look good at all.
I know some other counties are combining some of their elected offices
To get,
to try and get their budget balanced.
and that may be something. I mean, we can't. Last year we took out 754,000 of savings to make our budget meet. It just continues to decline now. I don't know if we've captured all of our revenue on here, but we can't continue. And that's where, if you remember back to the treasurer's presentation, where she's super worried about savings and keeping those accounts flush on our savings side of it. That's what she's worried about, is we continue to take out of that and it's not sustainable. But you're absolutely right. Do you start looking at combinations? The hard part is when you look at all of our departments and you look at each elected official's realm, it's not like they're not working. I mean, it's a need. And so those counties that are combining, I don't know how they're combining, because the workload in combining doesn't go away.
No.
And so say if you combine, kind of like how you'd mentioned earlier, is a commissioner did the surveyor's office, that the surveying, we still have corner property. There's still issues out there with our parcel fabric. There's still road signs that they do. And so
absolutely.
It's not like that work would go away. The workload would, by combining, would only increase for one area and
So what
push
do
it
we
out
do?
further. I don't know. Hold our breaths. One of them, what we can do is go through and
What are our options?
pare down the budget as close as possible and see how much of that 1.2, but I just know that there's not 1.2 in our department budgets.
So what's
It's-
the biggest expense we have other than employees' wages?
Insurance.
That's right.
Insurance is one of them. And I talked to Anne Marie, so we're getting with GBS and seeing if all new employees, if we can switch to the HSA program now, but that's not gonna,
That doesn't help us right now.
no, not at all. Nope. No. And that doesn't help you. The,
See, and I think you start cutting benefits for employees, I think
You lose
will look
employees.
someplace else.
absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Some of the fees that we collect, you see on here, business licenses. This is a new one. Last year they brought in $2,500 in business license. That's a new program, and there's room for that to grow in there. You can't make government off of fees, but I know that in some of the fees that we do have in there, we should be doing better. We're not charging the amount in fees like other counties are charging, and so we're kind of a savings program per se with our fees. We need to finalize or upgrade our fee schedule overall for all county services. The recorder did theirs last year, and there was a bump in fee, but I don't think we've done like clerk auditor's fee, public health fees, building permit fees. There's things in there that we're leaving on the table. We don't have a fee permit or a permit system here for a use permit. If somebody comes in here and films, if somebody comes into San Juan County and films, there's no requirement for them to get a fee and pay for this permit, or get the permit and pay for the fee. So that's one of the things that the tax commission mentioned is you really should have a permit system here where you can start. And she had mentioned you'd be surprised at the amount of revenue that can be collected off of those use permits. So anytime you get some of these outdoor events, these Jeep events that come in, there's no permit system, permit fee, and it's hard to regulate if they have a sales tax. So if they're giving away a side by side or things like that, they should be paying a tax on that. She says that we're missing out on all of that potential revenue. It's interesting if we, a lot of times when we have a special event that's out there, they will ask our sheriffs and our ambulance to come and sit on site while they have these events yet. So we don't have a permit that we're collecting a fee on. Our employees are going out and setting on them. And what is the fee that they're charging, for their services? Are we recovering the cost to go and sit there and be there for the event?
What did the new legislation making EMS an essential service, what did that do when it was passed? Did it allow for any kind of help from the legislature or the government? What did that? I don't understand what that did.
Not from the legislator. What it does is the counties can now request the cities. So the cities have to, and we haven't heard from either of our cities or our town. They're supposed to enter into a MOU with the county or other ambulance services to provide those services. The county can charge for ambulatory services in those areas. Commissioner Gray Eyes asked a good question from our EMS directors. Show me your statistics. Where are your highest use areas? And so if Blanding is a high ambulatory use area, there's discussions that can be had where we can charge them for those services. Now Blanding on the other side is going to come back and say, well, we pay our taxes and that should be included in our taxes already. Well, everybody's paying taxes for our general services. If you can't make our payments, and if we have a debt that's there, then either we're increasing their taxes or you come and pay as a city for that ambulatory service. And especially if you're putting an undue burden across the board, if our ambulance services are primarily out of Blanding, less in Monticello, fewer in Bluff, then how is that fair to the other citizens throughout the county paying for Blanding services solely? And so we just got to look at that a lot closer to see really what the impact is on usage. But there is that law that cities are supposed to be contracting with us for that service in which we can charge. Some counties have opted not to charge cities, but others have opted. Up north along the Wasatch Front, they, some of these contract with outside entities to provide ambulance services, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, whatever it is that takes people up along the Wasatch Front. But rural Utah,
we write off $300,000 to $400,000 a year in that service. So I'm just trying to look at what are the big ticket items that are expenses to us that we need to look at.
That's a big one. Certainly a big one. The that law also allows that 1% sales tax to go directly to ambulance. There is that option. It doesn't increase your tax bubble. It just that disbursement of tax to the taxing entities that receive sales tax would get a reduction of 1%, but 1% of that would then go to EMS directly. Some have taken that percentage and split, where they take a percentage of that and that 1% and push it to EMS, and then the other percentage of that 1% goes to
If we did
law
that,
enforcement.
then I would wanna make sure that sales tax money goes specifically to those debts that we have to write off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to other things.
Not to
I'm
other
sure
things.
that department would say, oh, we need to spend it on this and this and this, and I wouldn't wanna do it unless it was going to directly affect what we're writing off.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So true. Um, so that 1% is out there, but again, you've got to get the population to approve that 1% sales tax. And so part of the thoughts behind that 1%, we've talked about it for a couple of years now, is, the health district has talked about, they'd be willing to reduce their take by 1%. So if that would kind of offset that 1% where they take a reduction to increase the 1% on ambulance. That was a couple of years ago that we had that discussion with the director of the health districts up there. But it would require us to go through that truth in taxation to increase that tax. Cities would have to be on board, and that may be something that we discuss during this MOU. And Darren Bushman, he'd mentioned that deadline is coming. I think it's a January deadline when the cities are supposed to enter in this agreement with us. I don't think our cities even know that there's that legal requirement for them to do so, but it may be during that we ask the cities to help us start supporting this, or they have to pay. Something has to give in that, because we are.
Planning, didn't the director tell us that they had high usage at White Mesa?
That's the other one that I was going to go into, is with White Mesa, you do have that problem there where they're not taxed, and so they're just using it for shuttle services. And I've heard this from both directors now. When Linda was in, that was a big concern of hers, where our ambulatory staff, they don't even like going out there because from some of those frequent flyers, is what they call them, those frequent flyers, they get in. I mean, it's almost blow to blow with our staff, because our staff will go out there and, like, you do not need to be transported, and we can't ultimately refuse them. So if they like, no, you're going to take me in, or beat you up or whatever. So they've had to have, escorts to go out there with the sheriff. It's just become a big problem out there. And at the end of the day, they don't have to pay. They don't pay for it. And so we have signed up for the UTREX to help alleviate some of this. And it'll capture the sales tax, or their tax, the personal tax, as an individual files for their taxes, and they get a tax return. It'll stop that return, and it'll pay the county back first before they get their personal income tax. However, if they're not working, if they're not employed, and they don't pay into that tax system, then we don't collect it either from UTREX. We would only then collect off of people that pay taxes. And
does any SRS money come directly to the county?
SRS,
Secure Rural Schools. I know that got authorized just recently. It's a little bit like PILT, but it's more of
Isn't that with the fire?
huh?
Isn't that with fire?
No, it doesn't. It supports more.
this right here, we get the Secure Rural Schools.
Right.
So about 50,000. In 2019, we got 105. Then it dropped down to 59, 52 last year. We're anticipating 50 this year. And so we do get some money from that. That Utah Navajo Revitalization Fund. This is that Navajo, the Springs project. And so we'll put some money in that. I think it's about 20,000 a year is what we collect from that. We used to have, this was higher, the Utah Navajo Revitalization Fund. We used to have a loan from the Utah Navajo Revitalization Fund that would help pay for sheriff's vehicles. And that was strictly to just kind of offset some of our costs of responding to the Navajo Nation incidences when we are called in as backup. The NRF fund paid for some of our vehicles, just kind of help offset the costs that the county was incurring to be more responsive to the Navajo Nation on those. But those loans have since expired, as well as the fund.
Are those vehicles still on the road?
They are. We still have them in the sheriff's motor pool. They're paid for now on those vehicles, and so. And then
What's this San Juan School District for 41 for 2020 proposed budget?
I don't know. I had a question on that one too. I don't know what there are 41,000.
So I think those are pass-through funds, and I didn't receive a number as far as what we.
Is that the recreation funds that?
Yeah, those are the recreation funds. I don't know if we're planning on.
Okay.
I've received it so far this year.
Oh, okay. That goes to Navajo chapters. Is that the one?
Yeah.
And some of it, not all of it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's it. So it would be a higher amount on the pass through because it's usually around 200,000 that we pass through. We receive it from state PILT, and then it goes through to the school district, comes back and goes to the chapters, kind of like you mentioned, Commissioner, goes to the towns and the chapters as well. But when you go down through here, you look at some of the revenue that we're collecting on there. The ARPA funds throws our number off on revenue because you got the ARPA funds that inflate this total amount down at the bottom. So it's hard to track our actual revenues on there because you have that inflated amount. Charges for service. So if you notice, one of the things I was going to point out in our building permits, I don't know why we doubled to 140. So as we're
expecting, like, if we had another employee and take on Spanish Valley.
Okay, so we'd recoup the cost for Spanish Valley. Okay, perfect. That's what. So typically we're around 60,000 in 2019. We jumped up to 83 2020 and 2021 108. So there's more building taking place, more inspections that are required to be paid for, knowing that part of that cost is being lost to Grand County because we pay Grand County. If we were to hire that full-time person back, take over Spanish Valley, then we anticipate that we'll be able to increase that building permits, building inspections up to 140. So we'll make a little bit more, but it still, the same token, it costs us with the employee on the inspection side of it. But we've tried to just come through here on our revenues and just see where we were at in the past and try to anticipate where we're going to be. A lot of the department heads of, Tammy, as she comes in for aging, congregate meals, home delivery meals, she knows primarily how much the state's going to provide to us. You see some of those that are decreasing on there, which is a question to the state and the programs that, is there a shift in program, a new focus in specific areas? So you'll see those adjustments throughout those that kind of help go to pay for the services. Some of these coming in are anticipated grants. You notice on the CDBG, we don't have anything coming in on CDBG. If we were awarded, funding from CDBG or CIB, then we would recognize those, but there's no anticipation of those in our budgets this go around. If we did receive funds, like we were awarded, Commissioner Gray Eyes and I sat on that CIB committee questionnaire on the Spanish Valley floodplain plan. We were awarded those funds, and so now we'll have a CIB grant that we'll have to enter in here and create that expense somewhere else. But that was almost $40,000 that we were awarded for that one.
Did that come directly from CIB?
Yeah, it was one of those projects that can be funded by staff, that $50,000 or less, and so we didn't have to go to CIB board. It was all done administratively.
Did we ever submit for a Lasalle community feasibility study?
No, I have that. We're still working through that one. I went out and asked 3 engineers for proposals for that. And the process is you ask for proposals and qualifications, and then you narrow it down from those 3 to 1. You go to the one that everybody likes and select. You ask them what the cost will be then, and then we would start wrangling that. And so right now I'm at the evaluation. I've had them for over a month setting in. I just haven't been able to get to setting up an evaluation team. And
Did you get a call from Hardy Red? Lasalle?
No.
He bought 4 wells from Rio Algum and a great big water tank, and he wants to
Set that up.
use those 4 wells and that water tank
Okay.
to help supply gravity flow water to the community.
Okay.
I gave him your number
Yeah.
to call.
Haven't heard from him.
You said he would. So.
Yeah, they'll probably be coming in. It might be working with there's a couple up there that are working all together to try to figure out the water situation there. And so
And then Scoot called me about the feasibility study.
yeah.
Kind of lost track. So
Yeah. So they submitted kind of all of it. Was that first response was just qualifications, and then I just haven't had time to
I'm on, Mike.
form a selection committee. And then once we have that selection committee to narrow it down, we'll ask for prices. Once we get the prices, then we start to seek out funding.
Okay.
So I would anticipate that would be more than the 50,000. I think that's going to be a lot more. That's a big community. Yeah. And part of that too, I mean, you've got some of these you need to think through is we've got the Wilson Arch Special Service District. I don't know why we have them as a special service district. They're not. It's just a development. For me, Eastland community makes sense as a special service district. Spanish Valley, I mean, these are whole communities. LaSalle would make sense as a special service district, but Wilson Arch, that is just really a development. It's not a big community.
I think there was some difficulty in the residents dealing with the developer and living up to promises that had been made, and the only way they could see their way out is to take over the
special
leadership, and that was through the special service district.
Okay. So they took over the leadership, but they didn't take over the asset. So it's like the developer still owns the lines, and then you've got a special service district running it on the other side and collecting a fee. So there's a lot of problems with that. When you enter into and you create a special service district, ultimately, if the special service district fails, the county has to step in and maintain ownership of that. And so that's kind of a tricky one. I don't know why with Wilson Arts we're there when the developer is still there with it. But we're working with the special service district on there. The developer on the other side has repeatedly had problems with that side of um, the infrastructure there, and has kind of asked for state support to receive funds to build another tank and more infrastructure, better pumps. We're hearing that some of the wells are at failure. The castings are falling in. But the other side wants the special service district to take over the total. A couple of years back, our attorney advised that the special service district did not take on any more unless it's in good standing and top shape. And so they're still working on that one. That's a concern, but just when we're budgeting that, things like that can come through the county as well. But I think overall on our revenue, we just try to match and come as close to what we had as last year. One of the things that I don't know, and I know that as we went through, through our budget process, there was a question on the election side of it. I don't know if we charge the cities for this next election. I don't know if we have in the past. I don't know if you guys would have looked at that.
We haven't for countywide election.
Okay, so countywide, we don't charge the cities. Okay. So there's no revenue there that can be had from the cities or towns on election fees. But they've done a good job this year. We restructured some of our contracts with the cities and towns so that we're recuperating some of our costs. Prior years, we just charged primarily for the ballots and the printing. We didn't charge for staff time or anything like that, which administration of the municipal elections we hadn't charged in the past. We are now going forward charging for those. I don't know if you guys have any comments, concerns, James, with our revenue.
No, I think the main thing is just direction as far as where the commission would like to see.
I don't know if we can cut revenue.
No,
We need more of that.
Are those budget projection including the additional personnel that were requested?
So in your expenses, you have those, right? I don't know if
we have a lot of those in there, but
okay.
There were some requests that we didn't have numbers for, and so
Still questionable.
still questionable.
Do you have those highlighted on here?
No, but with the two different columns, if there's a difference in the salaries and wages, usually it's one is our actual staff, and then if there's a difference in the salaries, then it's then in the other column it will show additional cost.
Okay.
Give us an example on the screen.
Let's see if we go to
Go to
planning departments, one that would increase.
planning and zoning.
So right,
No, I think we already
put the guy in there.
uh,
Justice
go to the
courts
assessor's office.
stay the same. Clerk, auditor, treasurer, recorder, county attorney, a part-time.
Yeah.
So here's the part-time for the county attorney. So it went from 267 to 294.
A lot of those aren't in there because I don't know what looking at for new position.
Yeah.
What about the assessor? There's no, it doesn't show.
Not included there.
Assessors. They had asked for that full time in there, so that one hasn't been adjusted. So we'd have to adjust that one. Part of it, I just holding true to some of the things. If just with travel and some of these office expenses, the year hasn't been finalized yet. But when you look at, and he's adjusted some of these already down to meet, kind of current spend. There's not
as
a lot.
far as the with $1,000 supplies, you just had it up this one. Office expense.
That one right there. Yeah. He spent, so he had 1,500 in his budget this year, only spent 523. The previous years he was at 1907,
But
2,277.
those were actually what they expended.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And so he's dropped down to 1,000. So he's actually decreased his budget from 1,500 to 1,000. Went from 600 here to 200 here. And so he's going through and he's reducing, which is what you want to see. If they do hire another person, obviously your office expenses and things like that are going to be a little bit higher. But he's pretty conservative on his budget. The travel expenses, if you have somebody in there to train, is going to be a little bit higher. This is
zero out the telephone.
the telephone. Yeah, it's zero. He hasn't taken anything, so we budgeted 500 last year. He hasn't expensed any.
A lot of those are going away to the IT department.
The actual telephone, yeah. If you see telephone in there now in a department, they've got a cell phone, a county cell phone, or something like that. That's coming out. So he's been pretty conservative. The hard part when you look at 2020 and your 2021 actuals, that's your COVID years. And so travel was restricted. They didn't have meetings outside of the offices and that. And so as that starts to pick up, and you've seen this as well in our meetings, is they're starting to have more and more face-to-face meetings. So travel will pick up for every department now because of that. But I think holistically, that's typically what we would do is staff, as we go through and we look at our revenue to see if there's missing revenue that we have on there. 1.2 that's a lot. Something for me, there's not 1.2 million in department asks here. We haven't increased our department asks significantly to warrant the 1.2. So we've got to figure out what's driving that. Are we missing revenue in here? We can go through. So we typically go through and just like we just did the recorder's office. We were going through the recorder's office, looking at hers. I don't know why there's a difference in salary in hers, because we're holding her.
They requested that it's for that new position, replacing staff.
So they want 4.
58 should be correct.
So they want 4 people in there.
The 129 is with like one of those positions hadn't been filled for some time.
So the Chandler.
So, with their full staff, they would.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, they're at 162, 164. they lost an employee, so you're putting them back into 158. They were at 157 last year. Okay. But I go through and I look on here, does it make sense what we're doing? Office expenses, they were full staff at 3,000, just roughly under 3,000. They bumped up to 5. They're at 4,300 now. They want to go up to 5,200. The software maintenance, in here, you heard of some of the adjustments that we've made in the recorder's office for software. Software that we're bringing on with Esri is going to cost a little bit more. I don't think it'll be 10,000, probably closer to the 8. So we can easily reduce 2,000 there, but we've got a lot of 2,000s to come up with. But overall, from where we used to be back fully staffed, we're still less than where she used to be. The assessors, we haven't increased that one for that. I don't know. So in general, you do have Rick in there. Rick's, as he goes out and assesses property, we've had the part-time in there, so our part-time goes away. So there's $12,000 there that we provided to Greg. I believe it was 12,000.
But I kind of got the impression that he was asking for another employee because he thought he could increase properties that are not being captured by the assessor's office.
Yeah, that's part of it.
And that would make sense to me if he's aware of some properties that he's not capturing, that
Yes.
with another employee he's going to be able to capture those properties.
Absolutely. That's a true statement.
I think that's probably a pretty good trade-off.
It will be, and it'll make the county money. Plus, the other one for me is probably more, is you have that, but the legal obligations for the assessor's office to be open during business hours is a legal requirement by state code. We haven't met that requirement for probably a while now, because if Craig's not there at a part-time basis and Rick is gone, the office is closed. And that's one of the offices that's spelled out legally to remain open to the public, along with like the clerk's office, auditor's office, treasurer's office, recorder's office. The only one that isn't required and spelled out in state code is the surveyor's office.
Well, I'm just saying, I think you're going to increase your income from the assessor's office to offset the new employee.
Yeah. Now you do have 2 employees that are also tied with the assessor's office on here, that work in the DMV. So both of those employees are also there. So really this would be 4 employees under that umbrella. I question sometimes the DMV. It would be nice to look at and sit down with the state. I don't think the state is fully reimbursing what it costs to run a DMV. You hear, from some of our residents that it would be nice to have a DMV further south as well. I don't think the state, I think all I've really seen is 1 DMV per rural county. I haven't seen 2 or 3. I don't think the state's willing to do that, but nevertheless, is the state willing to pay? I don't know if we've ever asked the state to pay more for their DMV. Sometimes there's the 2 people in there in the DMV. They're just sitting there, nobody there. Other times you come in and there's a line. So I don't know if there's some offsets that can take place there, just time management where they can cover more of the assessor's office, but also provide the DMV. My question is can I stick one of the people in DMV in the assessor's office and have them perform DMV function in the assessor's office if it's too busy? So if one becomes too busy, then we can push more into the assessor's office. And so either way, it kind of hurts us because that assessor's office, just like you had mentioned, is the fact that they've had checks that aren't being cashed and things like that. Pretty concerning.
Properties that have
Properties haven't been assessed. Yeah.
20 years.
Yes, yeah. And that's part of it is the assessments are critical. In here, you do have that $67,000 contract where we'll contract out with that service. That's one of those things I just think we need to have that taken place. With here is we have yet to enter into a participation agreement with the CRA, the only CRA that you have, which is down in Bluff. That's going to be a payment as well that we've got to take out of our taxes and give back to that developer. If you remember what that was, you had the Bluff dwellings that came in, and the county agreed that we would take and offset some of our tax increment that he basically generates for the property, give it back to him to go back into the infrastructure. There's that turn lane, things like that he had to pay for to get that development to go. We haven't entered into that participation agreement and haven't started reimbursing him. It's a 20-year reimbursement that we have to get to, and so you'll see that working this year, so that when those taxes, and you have to declare it right up front with your certified tax rate, that a portion of this is going to go to that CRA as a tax increment back to that developer. And so that isn't in here. I have Elaine working on that, so we can try to figure out what that is as well with Cody Dieter, who helped us establish all of that. The health district did mention that they were willing to enter into that CRA with the county. The school district refused to enter into that. School district, and I think probably public health, those taxing entities did not enter into that CRA with us. Surveyor's office, his were simple. You can kind of see where he's reduced some of his office expenses have increased. Those are things that we can work with the department heads to see really where we can come down to. It's the same thing if, like on the phones, if these are county phones, you're increasing up to $1,000. You're only spending $557, $669, $667 kind of across the board. Why do we need $1,000 in there? That professional and technical is the additional training, things like that we had to get staff on. We can go through and try to fine tune that a little. He's going from 184, keeping staff whole, up to 198. Part of this we also have to remember is with the assessor's office, they no longer want to do signs at all. They want to get out of the sign business. If we get a full-time person in there, we can't have them all of a sudden dropping out and going and getting signs. I think Rick is going to be super busy on getting our assessments up to where they were. I don't see how he can continue to do signs. There will be...
He wanted to pass addressing
to
the surveyor.
Yes, to the surveyor's office. And so that whole system would now go to the surveyor's office, which, like I said, with the surveyor's office, there's still hub issues. Part of the surveyor's revenue includes the the corner markers, the historic markers, making sure that we have the preservation of those boundaries, those corners. The monuments, yeah, that was exactly it. So it's going and verifying those. They still go out and do that. That's not complete throughout the state, complete throughout here in the county. As we work through the parcel fabric, putting that online, there's a lot more questions on corners, things like that, that the surveyor has to help resolve, so that he'll be taxed a little bit more, with his staff, with the added addressing and signage. But I don't know where else to take it when we're not meeting our legal obligation in the assessor's office. Non-departmental, there's not a lot of wiggle room in here. We do have, this is something we've got to work on, is the American Recovery Act expenses. Everybody's kind of keeping this off of their books, recognize it as kind of a reserved revenue, but not putting it in as an expense until they need it. And we really need to be super cautious with our funds here to make sure that we're recognizing it as a revenue, but it's a reserved revenue, and we don't expense it. We don't put it into our general funds as an expenditure, because then we have to account for it back to the feds. It's easier to keep it in a reserved fund until you need it, and then bring it across, whether it's missing revenue and bring that in as a missing revenue, or bring it in as a process or a project and expense it out as a project. For example, we have if we were to fund, the Lasalle water study with our ARPA funds, then we would bring that in as the Lasalle water study fund and disperse it through that, so that we can monitor and make sure we can report back what we spend those funds are, but it doesn't get commingled with any other budgets unless it is missing expenses. If it's missing expenses, you just bring it in as revenue and or lost revenue. If you bring it in as lost revenue and then you push it through the revenue, you can spend it wherever you need to spend it. And I think that's important to note, that we don't target specifics on that fund. If it was the revenue that we missed, like our TRT took a nosedive last year, and we can bring in ARPA money to fix that lost revenue, but we do not have to target where we expense that revenue, if that makes any sense. So we just want to keep that as broad as possible. You don't have to get to the finer details of where you spend that missing revenue. And so that, I don't think we've taken, and this is a question for James, where we anticipated taking $300,000 a year in wages. Has that been?
From the ARPA funds?
Yeah.
No, the revenue for the ARPA fund is it's zeroing itself out.
Okay.
In the budget. So.
Okay. So that may be an adjustment that we have to make too, is where we can take some of those and place it to the salary portion, as well as, because we had kind of committed to that $300,000 a year going to the increases kind of across the board, as well as the additional people.
Question. The fiscal year is coming to an end. All the unexpended dollars protected,
Mm-hmm.
which is on the balance sheet. What happens to those funds? Are they included in this?
So we don't know what that number is going to be yet. If you look at the 2021 actual, it's
Yeah.
only showing $9,000 there. We haven't finished receiving our revenue for the year, and we haven't finished all of our expenditures for the year either. So if you look at 2020 actual, we actually had a loss of 750,000.
What are you looking at, James, on here?
Just the overall total. At the top
Up here?
left.
Okay, yeah.
But don't we get a surge in revenue in December coming from property taxes that are paid in November?
Sometimes,
Those won't be
yeah.
accounted for until December or January even?
Right, and so we don't know what that number is going to be for 2021 actual.
But we know approximately.
Estimation.
Yeah, so that the estimated is 153,000, so it's not a large number compared to what we're.
And so with that, we would roll that back into the budget for this next year, and that begins your base budget. But mind you, 754,000 of it came out of savings.
Let's see. Not positive, but I think there's a number there that was going to be pulled. That was
Right
estimated to be
there,
pulled
your
from savings.
730.
$730,000 was expected to be pulled from savings, so I'm still. My guess is that we will have a loss. Like we're pulling around $700,000 from savings each year. It looks like we didn't actually make that transfer in 2020, but
We didn't?
no. So if you look at the 2020 actual, it shows that 750,000 negative.
Right.
As far as on the balance sheet.
So do we do that at the end of the year?
That's, I'll have to check with the auditors as far as how they do that. How that's supposed to be done.
Does it have to be done by the?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it can be I think it's a journal entry
That we do
that can be.
to balance out.
I thought you had to pass a balanced budget by the end of the year, Mac.
Yes.
Yes, as far as what you're budgeting for the future year, you're
Yeah.
supposed to pass a balanced budget.
So what you're telling me is in 2020, we budgeted 754,000.
No, that's what actually happened in 2020. So these are your actual numbers. In 2021, we couldn't get the budget to balance. So you had the $730,000 that was appropriated to balance the budget, saying that we would take $730,000 from savings to balance the budget. But I think we're actually in better shape as far as our actual, because we haven't received all of our actual revenue so far this year. And
So it may not have
we
to-
really did
May not have to be that much.
cut back on expenses this
Okay.
year. So hopefully we're actually a lot better shape than we projected. But overall, we are borrowing a lot from savings.
Me and Willie have been trying not to eat breakfast when we travel. So we can help the county
Totally.
balance their budget. Right, Willie?
Looks
Yeah.
like it's been helping.
Yeah. That's been helping.
Yeah. So we will go
We
through.
won't have the actual, but what we ended up with till sometime in January or February. So we'll know how much of that we had to transfer.
Correct.
Because those expenses in December really don't get reported until
even into January, we're still pushing some of those expenses back
Are we?
into the
Okay,
previous year, if they were incurred in that year. So
yeah,
it's, yeah, it's hard to project those numbers.
right.
We do have to make some final adjustments to this budget before we close out in December. And so typically that last commission meeting, you approve next year's budget, and then
So
you
you're-
also approve the
You're telling
final
us
this year.
there's not much expense to cut,
Hey, Mac?
and there's probably not much difference in revenue coming. So about the only choice we have is to project at that meeting, we're gonna take money out of savings to balance the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, unless we can find it. We'll whittle as much down as we can from the staff budget, the employee budgets,
Yeah.
but yeah. And it gets into, your sheriff, he asked for additional staff on there.
You got the attorneys,
Attorney asked for additional staff, and it's like, how do we
assessor. I think
pay?
those are necessary.
Yeah.
Kenneth,
You're on.
Yes, sir.
you're up to bat.
I was gonna ask to see if we have I don't have anything. My laptops and everything's down. So, do we have the budget posted already?
It is online. Yes.
It's online?
I
I
posted
got-
it in the public notice area.
Uh-huh.
And so it's on the public notice website where primarily everybody goes to. I'd have to look and see if it's should be also on the county's website under this meeting. It's in the packet.
Yeah, could you go ahead and check? Yeah, could you go ahead and check so that way it'll be nice if the public could see what we're doing.
It's there. It's on the county's website under the meetings portion of the website. If you look at the meeting packet,
Okay.
I published that yesterday.
All right. Thank you.
I think so. Should be there. That's some great failure of our website, but it should be there.
Technology's great until it doesn't work.
I know. Yeah.
Yours work all the time? In technology?
Good until
Till you need it, huh? So yeah, we'll before you finalize this, there's a lot of work to do. I don't know if there's specific direction that you guys can think of, things that we can cut out of here. We did budget a lot for the fair. Those are community things that I've talked with Natalie on the TRT. It's on what you can spend TRT on. That's one of the adjustments that we haven't had here is economic development. We're still working on her budget to finalize that and the TRT revenue coming in. So there will be some adjustments with that. Not a lot to make up for 1.2 million, but there will be some there, as well as that mitigation, the things that we can spend tourism funds on, which is that law enforcement piece, which, does that pay for the attorney's full-time employee? If we can use that as mitigation efforts. Well, when I talked to him, I asked him, are a lot of the efforts and that citation wise, does that come from the tourism aspect? And most certainly it does. So I think we'd have a strong argument that we could certainly use mitigation TRT funds for attorney And so,
But didn't we think we could supplement some of the fair budget with ARPA funds?
I'll have to look and see. The interesting thing about ARPA is across the board, you can use ARPA to mitigate COVID. So if you have a COVID, you're trying to fight COVID, you can use ARPA funds for that. And you can use it so like your frontline employees that are out there, public health, you can use it for that. You use it for lost revenue. You can use it for the only three other things is your broadband, your water, and your sewer. That's all you can use it for. A lot of counties are sitting here stuck. Like, well, I didn't have a lot of lost revenue. I don't need broadband and I don't need water and sewer. So now I'm got all these ARPA funds and I can't use them. So they're sending that message back to the U.S. Treasury, and UAC mentioned like there's going to be some adjustments to what ARPA can be spent on because a lot of counties are like, oh, I got nothing, got all this money, and I can't even use it where I need it, and so there is that hinting that I haven't seen it come out from the U.S. Treasury of what the adjustments are that we can use ARPA funds for. But if the fair or a community activity, that would be hard. That'd be hard justifiable. But, you know, like where I mentioned, you can use it for lost revenue. So if we have a loss in revenue, we stick it back in. This lost revenue is being earned. Where we spend it is where we spend it. So there is that potential that, you know, we will definitely be able to show again this year that we have a lost revenue of TRT. Then we can bring in those funds for lost TRT revenue, and where you expend that lost revenue in your budget is where you would typically spend promotion and marketing, which is what TRT is. And it was interesting being at that UAC and going through that TRT discussion. It's specific in there that it's got to be used for promotion and marketing, and paying for fireworks for a 4th of July has nothing to do with marketing. Now, if they're sending out brochures to Europe and they can attest to that and demonstrate that they've spent marketing efforts, just paying for a 4th of July celebration fireworks show is not. And it puts us in default of meeting our state obligation for TRT because we're using that and passing it through as a portion of our marketing instead of, it's not a project. And so it puts all of our TRT in jeopardy if we're not following the state rules with how we spend our TRT. So just a happy note on that one. But there are definitely opportunities with that. There were some discussion on dispatch. I don't know your sense on that. I think you have to look at all these opportunities that are afforded the county, even if it gives up a little, but frees up staff in other areas, then I think it's a value added. You did have that presentation on dispatch. And the opportunity that will be a little bit more painful for some of our cities because they will have to pay for that service elsewhere. But truly, if it clears up that 336,000, you know, there's some of that we would have to keep in salaries, and that for our corrections and control area, but some of that does go away.
You still have to have somebody run that control room.
You have to have somebody run the control room, but your software maintenance, your equipment operation, we still would have to pay for the service ourselves as well. but you wouldn't have as much expense coming out of there if you go that route. If you were to take that and push it to price, they would take all of our equipment, things like that. They would also receive the revenue that we collect on here, and I can't remember how much we collect in revenue for 911, but that would also shift to price. We can't collect that 911 revenue. That surcharge, which is $175,000. So that revenue would go away with the expenses. So I don't know if you're willing to continue that direction. But I think we're at that point where we've got to start looking at things like that. The sheriff's airplane, obviously you see that going away now. That revenue, I'll pull some of that, and that's in Fund 45, I believe, our capital fund, where we need to allocate a portion of that to architectural fees, and that will help start the design and feasibility study for the EMS fire search and rescue building there in Spanish Valley. So that'll help begin that one. I sent Representative Lyman yesterday the appropriation request for the jail, and so if you get a chance to talk to him, just try to champion that project. That's a $17 million ask. That I'd mentioned previously. Our bonding capacity is about $12 million, and so somehow we've got to get other funds for that that project out there to make the whole project come forward. So if we can get the state to give us a portion of that, and then we can approach CIB after that. But so as the CIB list comes back up, and this is one of the priorities that CIB had for 2022, as we look at renewing that list for 2023, we'll probably have to carry that project over. I don't know if I'm going to get a good sense of where the state legislator is on that appropriation, if it makes it very far before the end of the year. Usually
they've got the money to spend, and they're going to have to spend it one way or the other.
Yeah. So we're hopeful. But yeah, if you get a chance to talk to Representative Lyman, just put in a good word for that project. He has it now, and we'll watch that going forward. But we don't have that in any of our capital projects either. Going forward, we don't have our 2.9 ARPA funds. We don't even have enough to cover the estimated plumbing costs of that remodel. In here, we are anticipating taking back more of the fire from Grand County and covering that ourselves. So there is that $80,000 that we're putting to this. Just as a reminder, this budget's increased on there because we avoid the payment going to Grand County, or it's Moab Fire who provides that for us. Instead, we'd be doing it all in-house, which is what that $80,000. That $80,000 will represent a lease as well as equipment that we can get to start that up. But in the end, either way, that $80,000 is a real number. We're either going to have to pay it to ourselves or pay that to Moab Fire. And so there's not not a lot we can reduce out of that budget. It's something that we have to pay it no matter what. It's easier to pay it for ourselves. It'd be a little bit more of a headache for Dave and his staff, but if we get the right volunteers and get a location that we can park equipment there, I think it'll work out pretty well. And then we continue to watch for grants to help with equipment in our fire. Tammy's been good to help with that as well. I don't know. We're at 10:39. I don't know what else you want me to say as we go through. We'll try to finesse this and keep your desires intact, and then what you guys want. I don't-
Commissioners, I felt on that 2021 actual, I forgot to say that those ARPA funds, like we received those funds in 1.5 in 2021, but we haven't spent any of those funds yet. So those are committed for future years. So that actual amounts up here, it looks better than it really is, because that's money that needs to be spent a certain way.
We haven't expensed 100% of those.
So we haven't
So
received our property
how
taxes,
many
but at
years-
the same time we have.
When is
should
the
be
expiration date?
The ARPA funds are good for 2024. They go up until 2024.
Okay.
Now, we still do have CARES Act funds that are still remaining, and we're feverishly trying to get those all spent. You'll see a contract today, contracting for the HVAC here in this building. I put in a grant request to do the boiler system, to redo that with the state. That was the rural grant program, and I used the CARES Act funds as a match on that project, and I don't think we were awarded that project. They would have notified us by now. But I was hoping to actually get a boiler upgrade on the system here. So
Dennis
we'll,
said he couldn't find the info on.
Kenneth, you can find it on our website.
Yeah. Wait,
Let's see. I'll have to look and see if I've got it on there. It should have been published.
so we can't adopt deficit budget.
No, this one, this meeting today is just kind of get direction if there's things that you think we could cut, or just kind of gives you another final pass. It's also a public meeting, so the public gets to hear some of the comments of where we're pushing things. Kind of pre-decision, but there will have to be a public hearing. That'll be a night meeting here in December. So you'd mentioned last meeting that none of you could make the first meeting on December 7th. So the only meeting in December would then be the 21st, December 21st. That would mean that on December 21st, you have a public hearing for your new 2022 budget, public hearing for your 2021 final budget, a public hearing for your redistricting maps for commission districts, and then a public hearing for your
And school district.
school district maps. That's a lot of public hearings on the 21st, and
All of it at the same time?
all of them on the same meeting, and you would want to have them at night so that most of the public would be available to attend. So on our website, if they go to the meetings and agenda section of our website where all of our meetings are posted, and you look up for the, if you can hear Commissioner Maryboy, under the work session meeting, if you go to the packet, you can download a 0.58 megabyte file which shows the 2022 budget worksheet, and then the 2022 county budget request from Blanding City, just so you're aware, has asked for $25,000 for airport capital. I think the interlocal agreement, I didn't get a chance to look at it. I think that interlocal agreement states in there that the county will pay 50-50 on capital expenses at the airport. They are wanting to purchase a fuel truck. They have for a couple of years now and made this request to the county for that fuel truck. So you got that $25,000 ask from them. Obviously, they want their rec funds on that request, as well as their TRT, that 1% of $28,129.83, and us to waive dumping fees for their cleanup day that they have every year in Blanding. So that's their budget request. But you see their budget request online in that packet, as well as the this spreadsheet that we're looking at on there. Hopefully, Commissioner Maryville, you can find that online. I looked it up on my phone. It was there.
I'm still trying to get this thing going.
Okay. So we've got some whittling to do between then and now. We can go through and set, as clerk auditor's office and I usually do, is we go through and kind of filter through here as much as we can to see what we can chop out. But I can tell you it's not going to be close to 1.2. And then if it gets too critical on cutting and combining, we can also meet as just kind of an executive session, call kind of a special meeting to meet in executive session if we need to make any critical cuts. This, kind of like James had mentioned, there's no salary increases or anything in here that's been anticipated or included in the budget, other than you'll have the shift from last year's 3%.
Is there an increase in the cost
Increase.
of insurance?
There was I only put a couple $100 of the increase in there. Your health insurance went from 1 point, so we had an anticipated in our budget of 1.5. I kept that 1.5. So far we're at 1.2 there. So it did, some of our insurance did cost. It just depends on whether or not the employees use those items that cost more. And so we still do have to pay. And you'll see it on today's meeting, is under the consent agenda, is the renewal of our premiums for this next year. We still do have a liability that's out there that you have to pay for additional coverage for one of our members that had previously had cancer. I think because of that, you had to have a higher insurance threshold on there to cover in case it went into a much more severe form of cancer. so far that that individual on our coverages has been fine. We haven't had to any excess costs on that. I think it was just one of those smaller forms of cancer that was removed, and everything is good. But we still have to have that insurance coverage on there just in case.
And this is all from Regents, right?
Yes.
Insurance,
Yeah. Yep.
additional.
Yeah. And they've been good. It would be as just as a reminder, 2 years ago, so the beginning of last year, we had actually went out and asked GBS to look at other providers of insurance. There are some other lower costing insurance providers out there. What it comes to us is really availability. We had switched several years ago to a different provider, and that actually, in the end, they thought it was going to be cheaper, but in the end, a lot of our users couldn't access healthcare at that point in time. They had to go onto Cortez to even get services that didn't. Our local hospitals, we weren't able to get it through our clinics, hospitals here. We weren't able to get the appropriate coverage for our employees, and so they ended up switching back to Regis after that. And so as we looked, I mean, we did ask that question of them, are there less expensive insurance providers out there? There are, but it's a switch. And oftentimes the employees either don't like the switch or you lose coverage, the availability of healthcare here locally. It's just pretty hard in the rural areas, but that's one of the things that we always ask them to look at as we get into this next year. That HSA that's real. That's something that we'll continue to work through on the HSA side of it to see if we can get some savings off of that switching programs. So any other questions about where we stand on the budget?
No.
Okay. All right. With that, that's all we have. We'll go through and try to fine tune that, see if I can come to get that closer on things. With that, all we need is a motion to adjourn, and then we can take a 5-minute.
Motion, we adjourn our work meeting.
Okay, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. 3 in favor, 0 opposed. Motion carried.
Okay, Commissioner Maryboy, I'll send you the link to the next meeting. We'll get out of this one and go into
All right.
the next one.
I'll wait for it then.
All right, I'll see you in a minute.